Greetings, climbers. So I'm back out here at wonderful Mission Gorge here in San Diego, and I figured I would do a follow-up video to my previous one about top rope soloing. Now, the top rope soloing video I felt pretty good about, but I did get a couple comments below that I'll showcase here about how I didn't have the opportunity to go over any kind of self-rescue system. So what I mean by self-rescue is you find yourself in a situation where you can't either complete the climb or you need to rapidly get off of the climb. But since you're attached by these micro Traxions or a progress capture pulley that may not be able to be released under load, that there should be a way for you to get free. And today I'm going to go over a really basic self-rescue technique and show you how you can get out of your top rope solo system in a safe way and either descend the climb or possibly even ascend your rope so you can get off the climb as quickly as possible. And to start us off, I'm going to show you what I brought with me today in my climbing pack. Again, this is what I brought for my top rope solo system. What you're going to bring for your top rope solo is going to be different depending on where you're climbing, if you're going to need directionals, if you're going to need traditional gear such as cams, nuts, and stuff to build your anchor, or anything else that may be unique to the area that you're climbing in. So I'm just going to show you what I brought with me today, and I'm also going to showcase and highlight the things that I brought for my self-rescue. First aid kit, hat, sun protection, climbing shoes. I always bring with me at least one cordelette, at least 20 feet long. I've got my harness with all the stuff on it that I'll need for the day. As always, I bring a couple quick draws just in case I need to set up directionals. Climbing helmet, because again, I'll be working in a top rope situation. And then of course, I've got my rope. Now let's go ahead and look at what I specifically have on my harness today that will help us with our self-rescue system. Something I do want to point out is what I brought with me for my self-rescue setup may be different than what you will need for your self-rescue setup. So as I stated before, please do your research ahead of time. Please learn the techniques from either a professional or someone who's been doing it for years and has best practices. Don't just take this video as the #1 sole source of you setting up your own self-rescue for the first time ever, okay? This is just supplemental information. This is for educational purposes. This is just how I do it. Okay, so for my self-rescue system or self-rescue setup, I am going to have at least a double length sling. This is just one of my anchor slings. This is quad length. It's like 260 centimeters or something. This is really long, but I can double it up or tie knots in it to make it shorter. So this is essential. You're gonna need something that is at least double sling in length. I also have my Sterling hollow block. This is what I use for any friction hitches such as prusik, climb heist, or the auto block friction hitch. So this is going to be essential that you have either this or a prusik cord. I think I saw someone call this like a hero loop or something. You're going to need one of these two things in order to get yourself out of a situation like I'm going to demonstrate today. But chances are, if you do any kind of rappelling, you probably already have something like this that you use for your third hand. So that's what you're going to need. You're also going to need, preferably, an assisted braking device to rappel off of or to possibly ascend on. Now, I prefer the Gree because this is really easy to use and has a variety of uses. Today, this is going to be my shining star. This is what I'm going to show how to get out of my top rope system with. This is how I'm going to do my self-rescue. So again, I'm going to be using a Gree. You could probably get away with using something like an ATC, but it's going to be a much more complicated system. So having some kind of assisted braking device is going to be very essential. And then, of course, you're just going to need some locking carabiners. The locking carabiners are going to be important because not only are you going to be building your anchor system with these, but you're also going to need at least one locking carabiner for your rescue system. So make sure, I like these carabiners because they have a nice wide basket that gives you a lot of opportunities and options to do different things with. So a locking carabiner. And of course, you will need some kind of personal anchor system. I think this is the Metolius PAS. I do eventually want to get a pet axle connect. That'll be somewhere down the line, but I really like this one because it gives you different loops here that you can clip into for different lengths. You will need some kind of personal anchor system for the technique that I am going to show you. Okay, and just as a quick recap of the things that I'm going to be using in my self-rescue setup, at least a double length sling, an assisted braking device like the Gree, some kind of hero loop, Prusik loop, hollow block, something to use that you would normally use for your third hand, and a personal anchor system. These are the primary things that you will need. The next part is for me to set up my actual top rope solo anchor and system. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and once I have that all set up, I'll meet you back down here at the bottom, and I will demonstrate how to get out of the system and self-rescue yourself in case you either need to just rappel down and or if you need to ascend the rope.
Hey climbers, sorry for the voiceover. A guided group set up next to me and I felt a little weird talking to myself out loud. So instead, I decided to just record a post-production voiceover. Okay, as you can see here, I have already set up my rope solo system and I'm about to start climbing. I will continue to climb up to a certain point and then let go of the rock to hang freely. At this point, I'm simulating a situation where I have reached a point in the climb where I can no longer continue to climb for one reason or another. And, as was pointed out in a comment on my previous video, microtractions cannot be released while under a load. If your progress capture pulleys cannot be released while under a load, it will make it more difficult to escape the system. Hence why we are going over this technique. Now that I'm dangling above the ground, I need to find a way to take my body weight off of the microtractions. For this technique, my first step will be to locate the loop that I use for my third hand. In this case, I'll be using a Sterling hollow block, but you can also use a Prusik loop. I will use the hollow block and tie a Klemheist friction hitch above the microtractions. This will be used to relieve the load from the progress capture pulleys. The next step is to attach the sling to the friction hitch. This sling will act as a step ladder of sorts so that I can stand up and remove my body weight from the pulleys. Again, I am using a quad length sling, but this can be done with either cordelette or a double length sling. Now that I have my stepladder set up, I will push the friction hitch up as high as I can and step onto it with all of my weight. You can also use the carabiner to assist you with this step if you need the extra boost. I then use my personal anchor to clip into the carabiner holding the sling. Now it's important to note that the shorter your personal anchor system is, the more slack you will generate in your pulleys. This is a good thing because it gives you more rope to work with as you escape the system. Now that my weight is on the personal anchor system, I can pull up the lower portion of my rope and secure it temporarily to my harness as I work on escaping the microtractions and attaching my rappel device. This will also act as a catastrophe knot, which will back up my rappel device before I start descending. As you can see now, my microtractions are no longer under load and I can easily disengage them from the rope. But do note that at this time, I'm only removing one of them. The one still attached will be my backup as I continue to escape the system. Next up is to attach my rappel device. In this case, I'm using a Petzl Gree-Gree. I'm only experienced with a Gree-Gree, but I imagine that most assisted braking devices that are capable of rappelling should be able to be used in this setup. But as always, do your research and practice in low-risk environments such as your home. After securing the Gree-Gree, I place my foot back into the sling ladder, grab up high on the rope with my non-dominant hand, and take a big step upwards. As I stand up, I'm using my dominant hand to pull the rope through the Gree-Gree. This now puts all of my weight onto the Gree-Gree and I can move on to the next step. Now, I'm going to pause here for a second. I didn't have the opportunity to record myself ascending the rope. However, you can simply repeat the last few steps we just covered and ascend your rope all the way to the top. I would suggest that you unclip the lower portion of your rope from your harness and let it hang freely as you ascend. There is no need to tie more catastrophe knots along the way since you'll still have a micro traction attached to your harness for redundancy. Though ascending the rope is an option, it does require more energy and it might take you a while if the route is steep or if the remaining distance is greater than just ascending. Either way, in this situation, I recommend that you just continue along with what I am doing and rappel back to the base of the climb. My next step in the self-rescue scenario is to remove the final micro traction. Once this pulley is taken off, you'll be able to start lowering yourself with your rappel device. Remember that my body weight is solely on the Gree-Gree and the only backup I have to this system is the catastrophe knot tied below me, so exercise caution. It should also be mentioned that my rope solo system has 2 fixed lines. This means that if I load just a single strand, it will not pull the other strand through the anchor. This is extremely important if your rappel device can only fit one strand of rope. But really, you should only be using a device you're familiar with and have used in a variety of situations. I will finish removing things like my slings and friction hitches before I descend. Finally, I will unclip the lower portion of the rope and remove my catastrophe knot. At this point, I can lower myself to the ground and fully remove myself from the rope system.
Okay, now that we've gone over one way that you can self-rescue in a top rope solo situation, and I've done some climbing, I'm getting a little sweaty, it's getting warm out here at Mission Gorge. I'm gonna start wrapping it up and give some final thoughts before we depart. So really one of the first things to remember, again, and I touched on this on the last video, that you want to be familiar with your surroundings. You shouldn't be doing this in somewhere that's new, somewhere that you don't know the climbing routes. Make sure that you know how to access the routes, make sure you know how to descend the routes if you need to. And really, if you're doing a self-rescue, you're at a point where you need to probably come down or go up the rope. So just make sure you know where it is that you're lowering down to. Can you get back up to your anchor system? And if you do decide to ascend the rope, will you be able to retrieve your stuff and come back down in a safe manner? So these are all things that you want to make sure you are paying attention to with the selection of your area. Now again, there are many different ways to self-rescue. I just showed the one way using the Climb Heist friction hitch and a Gree-Gree. There are other ways to do it, and really you should do your own research before you go out and attempt anything like this. Again, this was just informational, this was educational, but you should not rely solely on my knowledge. Go out, do the research, get training, hire a guide. Just make sure that you're doing things, that you're double checking all your systems, because really you don't want to have an accident while you're out here. Anyways, if you found this helpful, let me know. If you didn't find this helpful or you have questions, also let me know. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off. See you at the crag, stay safe, and have a great day.